Right, ladies and gentlemen, now the man who obviously needs no introduction, so I'll introduce him anyway. David Icke.
Thank you. Oh, not a face nappy in sight. Oh, how lovely. You know, we as a group of people, which is getting bigger all the time, who can see what much of the population cannot see, have an enormous responsibility. Because those who cannot see and refuse to see, who are caught in the spellbound stupor of 2 years of propaganda programming, are not going to bring an end to this nonsense. So we have to do it. And we around the world, and there are gathering numbers of us now, as those who have been to this point taken in to have the first 2 jabs, are realizing that that is not where it ends. It goes on and on and on. So in Israel it's the 4th. Their medical people are talking about a 5th and a 6th and a 7th. Pfizer is talking about 1 every year. Fauci in America every 8 months. And now, as they made up, invented, delusory Omicron variant is played out to insult our intelligence, Pfizer and co say, we are working as fast as we can to get another fake vaccine to meet the challenge of Omicron. Well, I can tell them, those psychopaths and mass murderers at Pfizer and at Moderna and at Johnson & Johnson, you don't have to work like crazy to find this variant fake vaccine you are talking about. You take 2 or 3 strides and you open the fricking cupboard and there it will be. Because these are already sitting there. There is a script, and all that's happening step by step is that excuses are being made, lies are being told to justify each step in the script. And I've been on this path of uncovering these people and their agenda for coming up 32 years. And people say to me now, how could you know this was coming? Very simple, because what is happening in current events is not random. If it was random, how could I call it? But if it's a plan which you can uncover if you work your ass off for 30 years, then you can call it. For a simple reason. It's not even predicting the future. It's predicting what the future will be if this plan is not headed off. And thus, by laying out what this plan is for humanity, if nothing intervenes to stop it, and that's been the idea all along, then what you're actually doing is predicting the future, because the plan becomes the future, which is what we're seeing now. So what is that plan? It's so important that people put this COVID hoax, this COVID nonsense into perspective of why it's happening, because if we see COVID in and of itself, we're seeing a fraction of the picture. When I started to uncover in the early 1990s, when I was walking through this square being laughed at by all and sundry, I saw that the world is not controlled and directed by people we think it is. It's not controlled and directed by prime ministers and presidents. Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, I rest my case. They are the pawns, they are the oil rags for the engineers in the background who are part of a network that goes back into ancient times. And when I saw how this, what I call global cult, was imposing its will step by step on human society, centralizing power so that every step fewer and fewer people are dictating to more and more, it was obvious this has not been going on for 5 minutes, 5 years, 50 years, 500 years. This goes way back into the ancient world. And when you do that research, you can chart that which is behind COVID back to Sumer, Babylon in what we now call Egypt, now we call Iraq, and to Egypt, and then on up through to become the Roman Empire, and up then into Northern Europe to become the British Empire and the empires of Europe. And at that point, this cult coming out of those lands went global. And it went global through something called colonization. They said that the sun never set on the British Empire, and all the European empires added into that. European countries, cult-controlled countries, took over the world. And then came this point where it appeared that the former colonies were given independence by these European powers, these cult powers under different names. But that's not what happened. What happened was that as apparently colonialism was rolled back, staying out in those countries was this cult network and the family bloodlines in the different countries which operate to a central global agenda. And those former colonies, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, all of them, Africa, have gone on being controlled by those countries ever since, or by that cult ever since. And so then you had this addition that has gone on since the apparent end of colonization, and that's something called globalization. Globalization is the centralization of power globally in every area of our lives. And what does that mean? It means that we have now a very small, you get them into one room at the core of the cult, group of people who are dictating to the entire world. And this is how the COVID hoax has been played, and this is how the reaction of almost every country in the world has been the same. The excuses have been the same, the narrative has been the same, the response has been the same. Why? Because it's centrally, globally coordinated, and we need to understand that. This is not about Johnson, psychopath and moron as he may be. This is not about the psychopath Whitty and all the rest of them. They're just agents of this global cult in this country. It's the central point of this global web that it's coming out of. And you see the agents of this central point, which I call the spider, in the form of people like Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab. Still gophers, still not calling the shots, still doing what they're told, but much higher in the hierarchy of the cult than is anyone like Johnson or Whitty, etc., or Fauci even in America. And so what we have is like a spider's web around the world, with a spider at the center in the shadows, which is driving this agenda, which they have been aiming for since Babylon, to create a totally centrally controlled global dystopia that would make George Orwell hold his head and say, my God, how I understated it. This is heading, if we do not stop it, to a point where the entire human race will be controlled from a central point, not least through artificial intelligence being connected to the human brain, so that human consciousness becomes artificial intelligence. That is the end game that this is going towards. So we have this web around the world, and each strand of this web is a secret society, a semi-secret group, or the world of the scene. Governments, health authorities, media, banking systems, corporations. So you have the spider at the center of the web from which it's all coming. And then the strands immediately around the spider are the most exclusive secret societies, peopled by those you'll never see. And then as you come out through still in the hidden, you're seeing the other secret societies that we do know about but don't know what they do. The Freemasons, the inner core I mean, not Bill and Joe down the Newport Lodge. The Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, Opus Dei, all these people, the inner core of the Jesuit order. And then comes in the web a point where the hidden meets the seen, what I call the cusp organizations. These are the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations in America, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome that was created by this cult in 1968 specifically to use the environment and environmental concerns as an excuse to centralize global power. And that's why in the COVID era, the COVID hoax is fusing with the human-caused global warming hoax, because the same outcome can be seen in both. Centralization of power over every fine detail of our lives to save us from COVID and to save us from human-caused global warming as it's claimed. So these cusp organizations, which include all the think tanks and non-governmental organizations, their job is to take the agenda from the hidden, ultimately from the spider, and play it out into the public arena. And that's where we see it. We see it in what governments do, government agencies do, banking systems do, Silicon Valley does, the World Health Organization does. And it looks at that point as if it's all random. And it's all different people making different decisions that aren't connected. But they're fundamentally connected by the web, by the cult. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how the world looks very different when you realize this. So the World Health Organization comes out, which was created by the cult to its DNA Rockefeller family in 1948, and is now run by the Rockefeller family gopher called Bill Gates through funding. And it comes out, the reason they created the World Health Organization on this journey to total global control was because they wanted control. I mean, what does this sound like in the light of current events? They wanted control of global health policy under one roof. And that gave it to them. So they come out with this nonsense which a 2-year-old could take apart. This COVID ridiculous intelligence insulting crap, and immediately Silicon Valley, Facebook and Google and YouTube, owned by Google, they say we're now going to start censoring anyone who's challenging the World Health Organization version of COVID. Now, if you didn't know about the web, you would say, hold on a bloody minute. You are platforms that's supposed to be about the exchange of information and opinion. What do you mean you're going to censor anyone that questions the World Health Organization? But when you know that Facebook and Google are not only owned by the cult, they were created by them. And these pathetic little boys in short trousers like Zuckerberg, who's supposed to be running them, they're just front people, that's all they are. And so what you have is an expression of the cult web in the World Health Organization being protected from exposure by a cult web-owned Silicon Valley. And that brings us to this. Have you noticed that when these Pfizers and when these Modernas and these Johnson & Johnsons and all these pathetic psychopathic mass murdering organizations, when they go to the agencies of government, like the MHRA in this country, what a bloody joke, and the CDC in America, the FDA in America, to ask for permission to use these fake vaccines on lower and lower ages, have you noticed they almost invariably get it? Well, why would that happen? Why wouldn't there be any kind of looking into it? Where's the data? What's the trial? Let's just hold on a minute and see that it's safe. There's none of that. Why? Because the big pharma cartel, now manifesting as Pfizer and Co., was created by the Rockefeller family at the turn of the 20th century. They created big pharma, they own it. But other expressions of the web are the MHRA regulatory agency in Britain, the CDC in America, and the FDA in America, and all these other regulatory agencies around the world that's supposed to protect us from big pharma are actually aspects, expressions of the same web that owns big pharma. So if you see the world as a series of dots and events in the world as random, then you're gonna never get what's going on. And that's why most people see it like that and so don't get what's going on. So this COVID hoax has been created to advance an agenda that I've been exposing for 30 years. What is that agenda? It's to create a centrally controlled dictatorship, dystopia, based on a world government, a world army, a world central bank controlling all finance, a world currency. I've been saying this since the early 1990s. What they're planning is a cashless one world currency. It's happening now in front of our eyes. And the other part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence. And the idea is to create a situation of total control of the human race via total dependency of the human race on the few at the center. So I've been describing it since the Hunger Games Society, as the Hunger Games Society, since the Hunger Games movies came out. But I was calling it something else before then. The Hunger Games Society, and I would emphasize again, I've been talking and writing about this for 20 odd years, is what COVID is really all about on one level. That Hunger Games Society, if you imagine a pyramid, is a tiny few people at the top of the pyramid. People call them the 1%, it's actually the less than 1%. At the bottom of the pyramid is the rest of the human race in servitude and in dependency for survival on the few at the top. And in between the two in this pyramid is eventually a fusion of the police and military into a police-military global state. And the police-military element of this is to protect the less than 1% from the population and to impose the will of the less than 1% upon the population. And if you want to create that situation of dependency, there's something you have to do. You have to destroy independent business, independent employment that is not dependent upon the few at the top. And this is what lockdown is all about. This is why they want another one now, with these psychopaths and liars of Sage and Witty and all these other people lying to us about a variant that doesn't actually exist to justify more lockdown. Why? To continue the job of destroying independent business and livelihood across the world. Because once that happens, you are left with, and especially with AI taking more and more jobs every week, you are left with a situation where the hell are the population going to get the money to live? And this is something that's been in my books way back, and now look at it. The plan is to introduce a guaranteed income for those that have no other, which will be virtually everyone eventually if we let this go on. And the guaranteed income will be a pittance, but you'll only get it if you do what you're told. So here's your pittance, but if you don't do this, you don't get even that. And by the way, if you don't want to do what we tell you, where else are you going to get your money from? Put food on the table. And so we've come to the real reason for vaccine passports. I've been saying for decades, if you want to see what's planned for the West today, look at China tomorrow. Or look at China rather today. And that's turned out to be the way it's turned out to be. It's no accident that this virus, they're claiming, came out of China, according to the official story. Because if you look at China today, that's what the West and the rest of the world has always planned to be. This cult was behind the Mao Revolution in China, and they did it for this reason. They wanted to create a closed society in which a system of total human control and surveillance using technology could be incubated, and when it was in place and perfected, played out across the world, so the world became subject to that exact same system. So that's what's happened in China through something called a social credit system. What that means is that you are under constant surveillance. There are millions of cameras in every Chinese city, and AI is tracking you in real time 24/7. What happens then is, if you behave in ways the Chinese dictatorship wants you to behave, then you get social credits. If you don't, even in the fine detail of your life, then those credits are taken away. And when you fall below a certain amount, you can know, and this has happened to millions and millions of Chinese people, you can't fly, go lower, you can't even go on a train, you cannot function in society as a normal human being. So, vaccine passports, what are they saying? If you don't do what the government tells you to do, i.e. have this lethal for many people, for their health and even survival jab, and more and more and more all the time, then you don't get your vaccine passport and you can't function in society as everyone else. And if you've had these fake vaccines up to this point and you don't want any more, well, sorry, no vaccine passport, you go back to the same situation as someone who's not had any. And so this vaccine passport is absolutely the start of something that's taking us into China. This is why they're calling them green passes, because they're going to encompass the human-caused global warming hoax into these passports. They're already producing credit cards which have a carbon limit each month. And if you buy things and they work out the carbon effect and all that nonsense, because we have to demonize the gas of life without which we'd all be dead, then you can't use that credit card anymore. And this is where this vaccine passport is going. And they'll add more and more and more. If you don't do this, your passport's taken away, because it will be long past just something for fake vaccinations. This is where it's going, and we have to understand this to concentrate our minds on the fact there is absolutely nothing in our lives that is more important than sorting this out. Nothing. People say my kids are more important. What kind of bloody world do we think our kids and grandkids are going to live in if we don't stop this nonsense now? Eh? We have to do it. There is nothing more important. And that means we have to stiffen the backbone, and we have to look this in the eye. It's not about I don't like it, but I'll do it anyway. Two types of people always allow tyrannies to reign all over the world, all through human history. Two types of people. One group, the biggest usually, just nods its head like a nodding dog they used to have in the back of cars, that just says yes sir, no sir, yes Mr. Johnson, yes Mr. Whitty, I'll get it, I must have my booster. And so it goes on. No questioning. There's no process of questioning of why you're telling me to do this, so that you have to convince me that it's the right thing for me to do. No, just do it. And then there's the other group who can see some of it, but are too frightened to stand up against it, and so reluctantly they do it anyway. And those two groups of people throughout human history have been responsible for every tyranny, because fascism and tyranny is never imposed by fascists and tyrannies. There's never enough of them. Fascism and tyranny is imposed by the population in vast numbers acquiescing and submitting to tyranny. And it doesn't matter if you submit to tyranny because you haven't got a question in your head. It doesn't matter if you do it reluctantly because I'm too frightened to stand up to it. That's the effect. And then there's another group. This group has ended every tyranny in history. And it's the group that has something without which tyrannies would always reign and rule. A little thing called self-respect. Self-respect has ended every tyranny in history, because it's self-respect that says, I won't do it. No! What has ended every tyranny in history? The power of no. We are not cooperating with our own enslavement. And we are now moving in. We that have chosen to see, because it's a choice, that's all it is. We are going into a period now where everything is going to be thrown at us. The lies, the demonization, already underway, and we've seen nothing yet. And the foot soldiers of the population, the people caught in the spelled stupor of propaganda, will be used to advance that demonization and that hatred. It's already there, coming. And we're going to be faced with, if you don't conform, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the other. So, with the gift, and it's bloody a gift in this world that we live in, a gift of sight to see what most others can't see, comes enormous responsibility, because we have to step up and we have to look this in the eye and wait for it to blink, because no one else is going to do it. And that means not going along with it. I mean, I saw the other day that the best part of 2 to 3 million people in Austria were being locked down because they were not fake vaccinated. Excuse me, 2 to 3 million people are going to be locked down by a government. Anyone got a calculator? How can that happen? How can a few lock down 2 to 3 million people? They can't without the acquiescence of those people. Without them saying, I don't like it, but I better do it anyway. Those days are over. That line has been crossed. We have to do what we know to be right. This is the challenge we have. To open our hearts and let go of the fear of consequences. It's the fear of consequences that have held humanity in servitude throughout human history. You don't do this, we'll do that. Oh, I better do it then. Not here, mate, not here. No. So this is a time to put aside consequences and just say, I'm gonna do what I know to be right. Is it right that I walk into a shop with a face nappy on? No, of course not. Is it right that I allow my kids to have face nappies on at school all day? No! Is it right that we let a psychopathic automaton like Wight just tell the population what's going to happen and the population does it? You're having a bloody laugh! Those days are over! This is not talking about it anymore. This is not, oh well, I don't agree with it, and putting things on Facebook. This is coming to the plate and saying, I'm not doing it. None of it. Lock down. No. Stay in your homes. No. Humanity has been controlled by a mind trick. A mind trick throughout human history that sells the illusion that authority has power. Authority has no power. What appears to be authority's power is the power we, the population, give to it in the form of acquiescence. Enough! Enough! We have a dishevelled brat and genetic liar in Downing Street coming to the podium to tell 60 million people what they're going to do. Enough! It's madness! Only spoiled minds would acquiesce to that. This is the time when we don't follow human history, we frickin' make it. By breaking the spell of the entirety of human known history, the spell where the many believe the few have power over them. They do not. It's the spell, the illusion that creates the perception of authority having power, which is actually the power of authority. Authority's power is that which we give to it day after day. Chris Whitty, we must lock down. Chris Whitty, piss off. Who are you, Christopher Whitty? Have you seen him? Is there life on Christopher Whitty? I see no evidence. So why has he been controlling the lives of the British population for 2 years? Enough! No more! We take our society back from here. Thank you.
David Icke, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause. What a man.
The coronavirus pandemic started in China. Oxygen, medical supplies and hospital staff have continued.
One of the 5 vaccines in research.
Stage 1, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus. You want a reaction and you want them to either say, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So one of the agendas is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers.